Bibles, you want to follow along with us. There's going to be two major passages we're going to be dealing with. One's going to be in Luke chapter 22, and the other is going to be in Mark chapter 14. So you can turn to Luke 22, maybe put a marker in Mark chapter 14. If you happen to have your synoptic gospel that we've been using in the adult class here in the auditorium, you can turn to page 214 because you're going to see all of these accounts next to each other and be able to follow along maybe a little more, a little easier than you can if you're flipping your Bible back and forth. Last time we talked about this emotional arc that Jesus had that ended with Judas kissing him, and just how he was torn in spirit. We talked about it was shaken. His spirit was shaken within him at Lazarus' death, at other points throughout this time, and it sort of came to a head right there in the garden where he was not just shaken, it was crushed. And after that happened, he says, "Let's get up, my betrayer is at hand," and Judas comes and kisses him on the cheek to betray him to the authorities. In that moment, Jesus protects his disciples by telling the Roman authorities that come to get him, the Jewish authorities that are coming to get him, "It's me you're looking for, let these guys go." Well, they take Jesus, and they take him to Annas first, who is the father-in-law of the high priest, and then they take him over to the high priest's house. Now, the high priest's house is going to be, it's very interesting. It's in Upper Jerusalem, and I want you to picture this with me for a little bit. We're going to use this building sort of as a frame of reference. This would have been a large house at the time, but our standards of large houses and their standards of large houses were different. So in our way of thinking, it wasn't a huge house, but to them it would have been. And it would have been designed similar to this inside of this building in this way. It would have had a living quarters, so let's just pretend behind me is the living quarters of the high priest. That's where he and his family stayed. It would have had rooms on the outside, and in those rooms, some of the servants would have lived, and there would have been gathering rooms to get together for various occasions. Sometimes they held meetings there at the high priest's house. And in the middle, this auditorium, we're going to envision this as being the courtyard. So there's no roof on this building. It's dark outside. We know that there's rooms all out on the side of this building. There's going to be a fire in the middle of this courtyard, and it is cold outside and dark, okay? Now, I picture, you have to picture the stone and all the type of deal it was. I just sort of picture some torches coming out of the walls, maybe by the doors to light the way, dimly lit. And so when they leave the garden, we find out in Luke 22:54, having arrested him, they led him and brought him into the high priest's house, but Peter followed at a distance. So at this particular moment, what's taking place right now, it doesn't appear that Peter is in the courtyard yet. He is outside the courtyard. So out on the end of this courtyard, there's a gate, let's say, and there's somebody manning the gate or girdling the gate. It's a girl. And so she's there to make sure only the right people come in. And so Peter's not allowed to come in. John is in this court right now because John is friends with Caiaphas. And it's interesting because it seems like the servant girl at the gate later is going to recognize John more as a friend to the high priest instead of a disciple of Jesus. So she doesn't even question John being a disciple of Jesus. So he must have been around enough in that area that she wasn't even, fazed by the fact that John came and asked her to let Peter in. So what is happening now over in classroom 6, if you will? A quorum of the Sanhedrin, middle of the night. Some teachers of the law have assembled in that room. John's not in that room. When they're in that room, they're questioning Jesus, and they're talking to one another, and they're asking, all right, we got him. Now what are we going to do with him? We have to come up with some kind of charge against him that is worthy of death. And so somebody had to speak up first and say, hey, I heard that fellow say, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up again. Okay, great, but that's not really against the law. He's just saying that he could, that's crazy, it's odd, it's out there. Well, somebody else stands up and says, I heard him say that he is able to destroy the temple and raise it in 3 days. So now we have intent. And one of the other gospel writers states it differently. And so somebody may have stood up and said, no, I heard more than that. I heard not that he is able to destroy the temple and raise it up in 3 days. I heard him say, I will destroy the temple and raise it up in 3 days. Whoa, that's serious. Now he is making some kind of claim, violent claim, that he is going to destroy the temple himself. And then somebody else may have stood up and said, yeah, you know what I heard? I heard that he is going to raise up a different temple, not like this temple. And the temple that he is going to raise up is a temple that is not going to be built by human hands. Well, who does that guy think he is? How's he going to build a temple without human hands? And so they go back and forth arguing this point about what Jesus said and what they heard Jesus said. And you know what? At the end of the day, Caiaphas had to throw his hands up because their testimony couldn't agree. And the Old Testament law said if you're going to convict somebody of something, you have to have agreement by at least 2 or 3 witnesses. And there's no agreement here. They're all saying different things about what Jesus said was going to happen to the temple and who was going to destroy it. He's accusing us we're going to destroy it. He says he's able to destroy it. He says he is going to destroy it. This is such a confusing moment that they don't even bring that charge to Pilate. I mean, that is it wouldn't have held weight with Pilate because it's sort of a Jewish thing, but they're not able to come up to any kind of consensus. John's still in the courtyard. Peter is still at a distance. Caiaphas, finally, he decides, all right, we're not getting anywhere. So he just asks Jesus plainly, tell us, are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? And Jesus said, yes. Boom, he tears his clothes. What need do we have of witnesses? We got them now. So let's read what the end of that was in Mark chapter 14 and verse 63. Mark chapter 14 and verse 63. The high priest tore his clothes. Why do we need any more witnesses? He asked. You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? And all condemned him as worthy of death. And some began to spit on him and blindfolded him, struck him with their fist and said, prophesy. And the guards took him and beat him. Still, if you're reading in the Synoptic Gospel that we do using in the adult class, John doesn't have Peter in the courtyard yet. So at about that time or around that time, John goes to the girl who's at the gate, and he motions for Peter to come in. Now Peter enters the courtyard at about this time. Now, from a strategic standpoint, if you're John, you probably don't want to be around Peter. Because what we're going to find out, John is comfortable in that environment. He's not raising any flags. Nobody's accusing him of anything. The servant girl let Peter in. But Peter is going to raise a lot of red flags. So if you just picture the fire is in the middle, Peter goes dark, Peter goes up there, he tries to warm up. Maybe John's over here somewhere, opposite side of the fire. He's just trying to stay away from Peter because he doesn't know what Peter's going to do, what Peter's going to say, and how this is going to end up. So Luke 22 now, Luke chapter 22. We're going to read in verse 55. Luke 22, verse 55. Now, when they had kindled a fire in the midst of the courtyard and sat down there, Peter sat among them. And a certain servant girl, seeing him as he sat by the fire, looked intently at him. Now, I highlighted this in my... Whenever you see things like this, just don't just gloss over this stuff. So she sees him, and just imagine seeing somebody that you think you recognize. I think I may have saw that guy with Jesus. And she just keeps looking at him, it's dark out, there's a fire. And finally, she says something. This man, he was also with him, but he denied it, saying, woman, I do not know him. And after a little while, another saw him and said, you also are of them. But Peter said, man, I am not. Then about an hour had passed, another confidently affirmed, saying, surely this fellow also was with him. He is a Galilean. So Peter said, man, I do not know what you are saying. Immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed, and the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he said to him, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. So Peter went out and wept bitterly. So let's back up and look at this in segments. The first denial, it was a servant girl. She saw him. She looked intently at him. Imagine how Peter's feeling at this moment. Have you ever felt someone watching you? You don't see them watching you, but you just feel them watching you. Peter had to be feeling that when that girl was checking him over, finding out, hey, I think I recognize that guy, looking at him intently. So Peter's probably starting to feel a little uncomfortable. Then she makes the accusation. Denial number 2 is in Luke chapter 22 and verse 58. Another saw him and accused him of being of them. So not were you of him, you were of them. You were part of this assembly that was all together. And then the third denial, it is the most intense denial. An hour had passed. So if you're Peter, you might start feeling, okay, I think I've dodged the bullet. It's been an hour. No one's recognized me. No one's noticed me now. Maybe you moved in the courtyard somewhere so no one else could see you. You probably definitely got away from those 2 people who have already accused you of being with Jesus, right? And if they look your way, you're probably sort of shuffling away to the other side of the courtyard, maybe trying to get as close as you can to the place where they're trying Jesus to find out what's going on. But this charge is even more amazing because Matthew and Mark both say, those standing there. So in other words, it looks like this third accusation doesn't come from one individual. Imagine how that could have played out. Peter standing there, and all of a sudden there's 5 or 6 people over there whispering, and they're looking at Peter. They're whispering and looking at Peter. And then together, they come over and said, surely, confidently it said, it's not like, I think you might have been with him. It's at this point, hey, we know you were with this man. And that's why the excuse or the reason that Peter gives, or the explanation that Peter gives, even becomes more vehement. He swears, I do not know the man. I don't know anything about this man. I don't even know who you're talking about, he says, on that particular occasion. And then you have that emotional moment that I want to discuss just for a few minutes and let you keep thinking about it as we partake of the Lord's Supper. The look. So if Jesus is off in one of these rooms to the side, maybe they bring Jesus out into the courtyard right at the time the rooster crows and he's able to make eye contact with Peter. Maybe there's some kind of a window or something that he's able to look into. But the text specifically said that Peter and Jesus look at each other in the eyes. And so let's discuss for a second, what did that look communicate? And in order to maybe get a good idea of what that look communicated, you have to know a lot about Jesus' character. For years and years and years, people have said this look said something that I'm not sure that it really says. So you have to know who Peter was. You have to know who Jesus was. You have to know the fact that Jesus has already told Peter this is going to happen. So Jesus knew this was going to happen. Jesus has already told Peter, Satan has asked to sift you like wheat. He knew Peter was going to be put through it pretty difficultly that night. He's already told Peter, when you return, strengthen your brothers. He's already aware that Peter is going to return. And we do know that on the same shores of the Sea of Galilee where he left all his nets, Jesus does restore him back by telling him, do you love me? Feed my sheep 3 times, right? Jesus knows all that's going to happen. Jesus knows, he's already told Peter, he's going to tell Peter later he's going to die a certain way. So he knows that Peter is going to come back. Peter is going to strengthen the others. Peter is eventually going to live his entire rest of his life for Jesus and die for Jesus. Jesus knows all of that when this happens. So what is he trying to communicate with this look? Well, some through the years has said it was a look of rebuke. Think about that for a second. A look of rebuke with Jesus' character and everything we know about Jesus? Is the one thing he wants Peter to know in that moment is, I rebuke you, Peter. I have a hard time with that one. I have a hard time thinking he wanted Peter to feel guilty. He wanted Peter to feel terrible. Because sometimes, can you make somebody feel guilty with a look? Can you make somebody feel terrible with a look? Can you make somebody feel like they're no good for anything with a look? Yes. I don't think that was what Jesus was doing. I don't even think Jesus was looking at Peter with a, I'm disappointed in you look. Because for some people, that's more powerful than a rebuke look, right? Hey, you can rebuke me, just get it over with. I'm fine. I'm glad with that. But when you look at me and tell me you're disappointed in me, that is even more powerful. I don't know that that was it. I don't think that's consistent with what Jesus would want Peter to know in this moment and feel in this moment. How about I told you so? I'm having a hard time with that one too. How about I'm hurt? I'm crushed by what you just did. It's possible. It's possible that that is part of it. What about, I know what you did. I knew you were going to do this. I love you. I forgive you. I want you to consider one other look that sort of helps tie in some of these talks we've been having over the last several months about the emotional moments of Jesus. On August 10th, I talked to you about a Greek word that starts with an S, and it's about that long. It's translated, moved with compassion. I refer to that as a uniquely divine emotion because every time it's used in the Bible, it describes an emotion of Jesus. As a matter of fact, in Matthew chapter 9, you don't have to go here. These will be posted later. Matthew chapter 9, compassion for the crowds. They were scattered like a sheep, no shepherd. He cast out demons. Matthew 14, Mark 16, as he's coming up to the sea, he wants that private moment with his disciples after finding out John the Baptist has been killed. And I pictured as the fog lifts, all he sees are feet and legs there. He wants private time with his disciples, and it says he was moved with compassion. And he taught the crowd that day, and then he fed them later. Matthew 15, 32, same thing. Matthew 20, heals 2 blind men near Jericho. Mark chapter 1, he heals a leper. Luke chapter 7, he raises the widow's son. All of these use that word, moved with compassion. 3 parables. The forgiving master who forgave all the debt because the servant begged, it says he was moved with compassion. The Good Samaritan was moved with compassion. The father and the prodigal son was moved with compassion. Peter has to be able to decipher that look and understand what that look means in a moment. This isn't a minute-long look, right? It's dark outside. Peter had seen that look in Jesus' eyes, that look of compassion over and over and over and over and over again. So it's at least possible, if not probable, based upon who Jesus was and what was one of his main goals. He wanted Peter to be restored. Does a look of rebuke restore Peter? I think a look of disappointment, a look of love, maybe. But I think this look of compassion really touched Peter's heart, that he goes out and weeps bitterly. And so think about that as we continue to partake, but also think about this. How does Jesus look at us when we come around his table? Does he look at us every Sunday with a disappointed look of how we lived last week? Does he look at us, how I want you to feel my rebuke today? Does he look at us in anything else but I have compassion on you? I love you. I offered my body so that you could be forgiven and we can be together. So as we continue to partake, think about that look, that moment their eyes locked, and what Jesus is really trying to tell Peter in that moment, and what Jesus wants us to know in this moment every first day of the week when we come together, and how he wants us to feel as we gather around this table.